Good morning. Nice to see so many children today. I'm going to tell you a story today that's probably the weirdest story you've ever heard. But there's a moral, and that's a fancy word for a lesson in this story. See if you can figure out what the lesson is to this story, okay? Joe had just gotten out of the army, and when he came home, he decided that he was going to start his own restaurant. So, he got the banker to help him to borrow some money, and he found just the right building, and he went to work and got it all ready to open his restaurant. And Joe had always been a good cook. He was going to be the chef in his own restaurant. And he loved to cook good food. So this was his life's dream being realized, to have his own restaurant. So he opened up, advertised, and people started coming, and people enjoyed his food, and people would come back. But then one night, when he locked up his restaurant, he didn't know what was going to happen that night, but something awful happened during the night. A burglar broke in through the door and not only stole most of his equipment, but vandalized the place and made it look like a war zone. And Joe was really, really discouraged and disappointed. But he said, I've always wanted to do this. I'm going to fix up the place and I'm going to open it again. And it took him several weeks to get everything cleaned up. He had to borrow some more money from the bank to replace his equipment because he didn't have insurance on it. And then he said, this is not going to happen to me again. So Joe went out and bought the biggest dog he could possibly find. And every night when he locked up the restaurant, he put the dog inside the restaurant. So he knew if someone came and broke in, they weren't going to steal anything. In fact, they'd probably run for their lives. So what do you do with the dog during the day? You don't want this great big dog running all over the restaurant during the day, because the customers wouldn't like that. So his restaurant backed up to an alley. And right behind his restaurant there was this alleyway, and there was an old army truck parked in the alley. And he decided, I'll put a chain on the dog's collar, and I'll chain it up to the axle of that old truck. And during the day, the dog can sit in the shade of the truck if it needs to. I'll provide it food and water, and all day the dog can stay out by the truck. That sounded like a good thing, and it was working fine. Until one day, one of the neighbors, who happened to own a cat, let their cat out. And when the cat came, it saw the dog chained there to the truck. And sometimes, cats and dogs don't get along very well. And this dog didn't like the cat and wanted to attack the cat. So the cat wasn't stupid. The cat sat just far enough away so when the dog chased after the cat, it came to the end of its chain and it stopped with a jerk. And the cat was about that far away. And this happened day after day after day. The cat would come and sit right there, and the dog would come chasing after the cat, and the chain would stop the dog just like it hit a wall. And the cat would sit there and meow. And it happened for weeks. This went on. Now there was a gentleman who lived on another apartment that was close to that alley, and he watched this from his living room every day. And he saw that cat come out there and tease the dog and tease the dog and tease the dog. And he got this idea. I'm going to stop that. So one night, during the night, he snuck down there, and the chain was still attached to the axle of the truck. And he put in about 10 more links in the chain. Now what that means, he made the chain longer. So that cat would sit where it always sat the next day, and when that dog came charging out, it wouldn't stop before it got to the cat. And the old man who did that, he knew what he was doing. So the next day, the cat came and sat in its usual place, and that dog charged after the cat, And it didn't stop. And it was coming right down on the cat with its mouth wide open and pouncing on it. And that cat took off running as fast as it could possibly go. And as it tried to cross the street, a car hit it and killed it. What is the lesson for you in that story? Okay, that was one solution. You should have put the kitty cat in the trunk. The lesson in that story for you is make sure before you cross the street, always look both ways. Children, they go back to your places now.